Good morning, everyone. My name is Nina Daniel. I'm the first Selectwoman of Weston, Connecticut. I'm here to represent the League of Women Voters of Weston, Connecticut, presenting a forum on gambling. Is it good for Connecticut? Do we need more? Our honored guests here today are Robert Steele and Tony Hwang. Robert Steele is a former U.S. Congressman. He's currently chairman of the Connecticut-based NLC Mutual Insurance Company and has been a director of numerous other companies, including the American Stock Exchange. He's a graduate of Amherst College and Columbia University, served in the CIA and U.S. Congress, and was a nominee for governor of Connecticut. He comes to us today, however, as an author to speak about casinos and the background of his novel, The Curse, Big-Time Gambling Seduction of a Small New England Town. WBZ Boston's Dan Reed calls the book powerful, and Connecticut author Martin Shapiro describes it as compelling and timely, a riveting story of history, money, politics that will make you wonder where America is headed. The reason the League of Women, and Tony Hwang is our, of course, everybody knows, Tony is our Connecticut senator from our district. And he is very vocal in Hartford on a number of issues, including in opposition to a House Bill 7319, which you might want to take note of the number if you want to write to your representatives in opposition to it. 7319 says an act concerning a request for proposals for a casino gambling facility in the state. This is, I'm not going to anticipate what our speaker is going to talk about, but that's what we are looking to prevent. The reason why I'm saying from the outset that this is in opposition to this bill is because in 1994, the Connecticut League of Women Voters adopted a position opposing additional forms of gambling in our state. So just to be transparent from the outset, this is what we're concerned about. And with that, I think I am going to turn the meeting over to Mr. Steele. And thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here, not only with the League of Women Voters, but with my good friend and colleague, Senator Tony Hwang, who's kind of my battle companion on this issue throughout the state of Connecticut. He's been the absolute leader in the state legislature on this issue, and it's great that he is here with us and can address some of the issues this morning. In any event, I do appreciate this opportunity to talk about one of the issues of the moment here in Connecticut, casinos, which of course are the subject of my book, The Curse, Big-Time Gambling Seduction of a Small New England Town. The book, The Curse, is a fact-based novel set against the explosion of casino gambling here in Connecticut back in the 1990s, when two Indian tribes built the world's two biggest casinos in southeastern Connecticut. The story begins with the Pequot War back in 1637, when the Connecticut colonists, living up and down the Connecticut River from Windsor down to what is now Old Saybrook and was a colony of its own at that time, got together with their Mohegan allies and defeated and almost destroyed the Pequots, who were the largest and the most warlike of the Connecticut tribes. The story then jumps 350 years as the Pequots and the Mohegans reemerge almost miraculously, thanks to Congress and the courts, to build these two enormous casinos, Foxwoods and Mohegan Sun. And in the book, a Connecticut family becomes embroiled in a battle to stop a third casino that threatens the family's town, an ancestral home. And in the end, a small, quintessential New England town, it could be Weston, it could be my old hometown of Ledyard, It could be Montville. It could be East Windsor. In the book, it is a fictional town. And this town faces what is essentially a Faustian dilemma, in which it must choose whether or not to preserve its character and its values on the one hand, or accept an enormously seductive offer that would change the town forever. And the family in the book, as I say, the family and the town are fictional. But the basic story has now played out in hundreds of communities across America. And since it is now playing out again here in Connecticut, I thought that this morning what I'd do is talk about the background to the book. But first I should probably give you just a little bit more of my own background because it played into my writing of the book in the first place. But I represented Eastern Connecticut in Congress during the 1970s. I then left Congress. I ran unsuccessfully for governor of Connecticut. And then I left politics, and my family, my wife and our 4 children, and I moved from the Hartford area down to Ledyard, long before anyone dreamed of casinos coming to Connecticut. And we lived there literally on the edge of the Mashantucket Pequot Reservation for 21 years. Which gave me a front row seat for watching, first of all, the political maneuverings that led to the casinos, and then seeing their impact. Indian casinos got their start back in 1988, not very long ago at all, when Congress came along and passed something called the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act. The act was meant to help poor, federally recognized Indian tribes build casinos on their reservations in order to raise money to support their tribal governments. It'd be fair to say, however, that Congress, in passing this law, had no idea of the Pandora's box it was about to open. Because as it turned out, the law not only opened the door to Indian casinos, but prompted a growing number of states to invite commercially owned casinos into their states as well in order to raise revenue without having to openly and honestly raise taxes. Back in 1988, only 2 states had casinos, Nevada with Las Vegas and New Jersey with Atlantic City. Today, 40 states have casinos, and the country is now literally awash in casinos. We now have almost 1,000 of them. Nowhere, though, since 1988 did casino gambling get off to a more spectacular start than right here in Connecticut. Foxwoods opened back in 1992 in my hometown of Ledyard, and Mohegan Sun opened in 1996, 6 miles away in Montville. Foxwoods and Mohegan Sun were the first 2 casinos east of the Mississippi River, other than in Atlantic City. And with no other competition, these 2 casinos, Foxwoods and Mohegan Sun, quickly became billion-dollar businesses, drawing well over half their customers from out of state, mainly New York and Massachusetts, but all over New England and the Northeast, creating over 20,000 casino jobs and beginning to send hundreds of millions of dollars a year to the state treasury in Hartford. Great story, right? Except, of course, the story is not over. And with each passing year, we're learning more and more about the downside of what has happened in Connecticut. For starters, the casinos have created a pervasive gambling culture in southeastern Connecticut. They've skewed the region's economy there sharply toward low-paying service jobs. And they were followed by a steep increase in the number of Connecticut residents seeking treatment for gambling addiction. One of the most remarkable findings from a 2009 state-sponsored study was that there had been a 400% increase in arrests for embezzlement in Connecticut since the casinos arrived, an increase that was 10 times what happened in the country as a whole, 10 times the national average. One of the embezzlers, incidentally, was actually my tax collector in Ledyard. And she managed somehow to steal $302,000 and lose it all at slot machines at Foxwoods. I never knew whether my tax receipts were among the money she stole, but I always assumed they probably were. In any event, she went to prison. A woman, incidentally, of pristine personal and public reputation, who never had a problem in her life before Foxwoods arrived and she became addicted to slot machines. The total number of embezzlement arrests in southeastern Connecticut, in fact, was so great that a columnist for the New London Day, our largest newspaper, described southeastern Connecticut as the embezzlement capital of America. Bet you had no idea that you lived in a state that housed the embezzlement capital of America. Recent embezzlement stories range from a Bridgeport elementary school principal charged with taking $10,000 in student funds to gamble at Mohegan Sun to the chief financial officer of Winchester, Connecticut, up in Litchfield County, who over a period of 5 years stole over $2 million from that town. An embezzlement that was so serious, the town of Winchester debated for months whether or not it was going to have to close its school system. Looking at crime overall, a 2014 study from Western Connecticut State University showed that the number of violent crimes, including murder, rape, robbery, and aggravated assault, increased in the towns surrounding Foxwoods and Mohegan Sun after the casinos arrived, despite a sharp drop in violent crime nationally and in Connecticut as a whole. And while the number of theft crimes decreased modestly, as was happening all over the country, the value of property stolen skyrocketed by nearly 40% in those Connecticut towns. According to the study's author, research also indicates increases in nonviolent crimes, such as prostitution and illicit drug use. As far back as 1997, and that's a while back already, Congress, which had opened the door to this explosion, became so concerned, a little belatedly, about what it had done that it set up a national commission to study the issue. Based on its findings, the commission recommended that there be a moratorium on the opening of new casinos in the United States until the federal government could get a better handle on the social and economic costs. But the recommendation was obviously never implemented, as I've already suggested, and casinos have continued to spread. In the process, casinos have become a $71 billion industry, and that's just gambling revenues. Does not include hotels, does not include shows, it does not include restaurants. It's just gambling losses of people. $71 billion a year now in the United States. The industry claims that by taking in this $71 billion, it is actually doing great things for our society, that it is spurring economic development, creating jobs, and providing states and municipalities with much needed revenue. An argument that has obviously resonated on the Connecticut state legislature today. Independent experts, however, who our legislators don't want to seem to listen to at all, contend that casinos do far more harm than good. They begin with the facts that gambling, after all, is addictive for millions of people in the United States, that gambling addiction more than doubles within 10 miles of a casino, and that gambling addiction leads to a host of economic and social problems, including debt, bankruptcies, broken families, and crime, most of which are borne by employers, law enforcement, social welfare agencies, and the healthcare system. Second, these independent experts reject the contention that casinos promote economic growth. Pretty big deal, since that is the whole basis on which the argument is made to bring in more casinos. In Connecticut, for example, the casinos have done little to help generate spin-off businesses. Just drive through southeastern Connecticut next time you get a chance. But they have accomplished something. They have cannibalized a number of existing businesses. One example of cannibalization actually involves a very good friend of mine who owned one of the most successful restaurants in southeastern Connecticut. And I'll never forget the day Mohegan Sun opened a couple miles up the road, and he told me how excited he was and how certain he was this was really going to boost his business. He thought for sure that with all these people coming over from Providence and down from Boston and up from New York and over from Albany, surely hundreds of these people would stop at his restaurant every single week, and maybe in some cases every single day. Maybe to have lunch before they went to gamble, maybe to have dinner on the way home, or maybe some of these 20,000 employees in the area, casino employees, would stop in at his restaurant after a tough day's work, maybe to have a drink at the bar, or maybe to have a bite to eat before they went home late at night. Unfortunately for him and for southeastern Connecticut, it didn't work out that way. And I remember equally clearly what he told me the day he surprised me by telling me he was going to close his restaurant because the casinos had eaten into his business so sharply. He said, "You know, Bob, I cannot believe how naive I was about the way casinos work. But now I understand. People drive to the casinos, they play at the casinos, they go to shows at the casinos, they stay at the casino hotels, they eat at the casino restaurants, and then when they're done, they stop and they fill up their gas tanks at the casino gas stations and drive home. We as local merchants rarely, if ever, see any of these people because they have come to gamble, not to patronize us." Third, there's very little evidence that casinos strengthen a state's or a municipality's long-term finances. And again, Connecticut is a perfect example. The state receives 25% of Foxwoods and Mohegan Sun's slots revenue, which has brought in as much as 1 year back in 2007, $430 million in 1 year at its peak. Yet, miraculously, Connecticut today is by far in the worst financial shape in its history, with a lagging economy, relentless budget deficits, the highest debt per capita in the nation, and people leaving the state in increasing numbers. And now the Institute for American Values, one of the leading think tanks in the United States based down in New York City, independent, nonpartisan, has published a landmark report that looks at the impact that the casino explosion is having on the nation as a whole. And I thought you'd be interested in their findings because this is indeed a landmark report. 1, today's regional and local casinos are different from traditional Las Vegas resort casinos that catered predominantly to well-heeled players who came from long distances away and preferred table games. In contrast, the new casinos are primarily filled with advanced, highly addictive slot machines and cater overwhelmingly to middle and low rollers who live within an hour away and prefer slot machines. 2, modern slot machines have transformed American gambling. As documented in a recent book titled Addiction by Design by a brilliant MIT professor by the name of Natasha Scholl, today's slots have become sophisticated computers engineered to create fast, continuous betting, designed to maximize what the casino industry calls time on device, quote unquote, in order to get customers to play longer and lose more over time. 3, casinos represent themselves as benign entertainment companies and argue that only a relatively small percentage of their customers have trouble controlling their gambling. They say, oh, it's not more than 4 or 5% of the people. What are you worried about? However, now, multiple independent scholarly studies show that 35 to 50% of casino gambling revenue comes from pathological and problem gamblers. 35 to 50%. In other words, the casino industry's very business model is dependent upon preying upon people with gambling problems, pathological and problem gamblers. And think about this. You're the League of Women Voters. Just think about this for a moment. Our state government up in Hartford, state governments all over the country, up to half the gambling money they are taking in and bragging about, they obtain by exploiting those individuals and the people around them who have gambling problems. The people around them, of course, are their employers, their families, their friends, their neighbors. 4, casinos constitute a regressive tax that hits low-wage earners and the elderly the hardest, often taking money those individuals need for basic living expenses. Moreover, you might be interested in knowing that the newest and most common face of gambling addiction in America is now a woman. A woman aged 50 and older. Women are particularly attracted to slot machines for a number of reasons we can go into in the question and answer period. But if you have any doubt about that, just go to any casino anywhere in the United States and walk down a casino line, a slot machine line, aisle. And who will you see? 70 to 75% women, usually 50 years and older. In sum, according to the report from the Institute for American Values, the new regional and local casinos drain wealth from communities, weaken nearby businesses, hurt property values, and reduce volunteerism, civic participation, family stability, and other forms of social capital that are at the heart of a successful community. Taking all of the costs into account, economist Earl Grinolds, the leading independent authority on the subject, has calculated that the long-term costs of bringing a casino into a new area typically outweigh its benefits by more than 3 to 1. And we've told the story again and again and again. And now the legislature is ready to expand casino gambling in Connecticut. Now, despite the costs, the conventional wisdom has been, to be sure, that Connecticut's casinos have been a net economic plus for the state of Connecticut in the past because of their success in attracting such an enormous number of out-of-staters who leave their money at the casinos and take their problems home with them. But the regional monopoly that allowed Connecticut's casinos to attract so many out-of-staters has obviously, as you know, been disappearing rapidly as the Northeast has become increasingly saturated with casinos. As a result, Connecticut's casinos are having to increasingly depend on the gambling losses of Connecticut residents, which, according to economists, simply redistributes existing money within the state without creating any net new wealth or economic growth. And of course, this casino glut keeps growing. And the more it grows, the more we turn on our own people to benefit from their gambling losses. When Foxwoods opened in 1992, there were only 10 other casinos in the 12 states of the Northeast, and they were all in Atlantic City, 250 miles away. Today, there are 58 casinos in the Northeast, and the number is on its way to 70, based on those on the drawing boards, already under construction, etc. Thanks to all the new competition, Connecticut's slot revenue is already down 40% from its peak. Foxwoods and Mohegan Sun have eliminated over 8,000 casino jobs. And like other casinos across the country, they are increasingly replacing full-time jobs with part-time jobs to reduce wage costs and eliminate medical benefits. The story is similar elsewhere, with growing competition cutting into the profits of casinos in more and more states. here in the Northeast, Delaware has now put millions of dollars toward trying to bail out its 3 casinos. New Jersey has spent hundreds of millions of dollars trying to prop up its casinos, only to see a third of them close and revenues plummet by 50%. And revenue even at Massachusetts' New Slots Casino in Plainville, which opened in 2015, is already far behind projections. With casinos increasingly cannibalizing each other, a 2016 study by the prestigious Rockefeller Institute of Government, the leading independent, privately financed organization in the United States whose purpose is to advise state and local governments, local municipalities across the country. They are now warning states like Connecticut that while new casinos may generate short-term increases in public revenue, that revenue can and increasingly is quickly reversing and declining. Now, by now, one might think that our legislators in Connecticut would recognize the short-sightedness of depending on gambling revenue. Instead, however, the legislature is considering 2 competing bills that would increase Connecticut's bet on casino gambling. The first bill would allow the Mashantucket, Pequots, and Mohegans to jointly open an off-reservation commercial convenience casino in East Windsor, Connecticut, about 12 minutes from Springfield, in order to blunt competition from the MGM mega casino being built in Springfield, in the hope of slowing the loss of Connecticut casino revenue and jobs. The second bill would set up a competitive process in which any potential operator, including you or me or any of us if we had the money, and including the tribes as well, could bid on opening a casino anywhere in the state, with the intention clearly being to open a casino in the Bridgeport area and to tap the Fairfield County and New York markets. Both bills would require legalizing commercial casino gambling, which of course is currently illegal in Connecticut, and would dramatically expand casino gambling in the state by making it more readily available to hundreds of thousands of Connecticut residents. The East Windsor Casino would be targeted almost exclusively at Connecticut residents, while the opening of 3 casinos in metropolitan New York in recent years has greatly reduced Bridgeport's potential for drawing New York gamblers. As a result, the revenue and jobs created by a casino in either Hartford County or Fairfield County would be paid for overwhelmingly by the gambling losses of Connecticut residents, which would merely redistribute existing money within the state, as we've already discussed, would contribute nothing to economic growth, and would saddle Connecticut with still more social problems. Only a lot more of them would be concentrated here in Fairfield County. Moreover, permitting the tribes to open an off-reservation casino would jeopardize some or possibly all of the money that the tribes currently pay the state under the current state tribal gaming compact, while allowing anyone other than the tribes to open a casino in Connecticut would automatically end all tribal payments to the state of Connecticut. And finally, legalizing commercial casinos, commercial gambling, would almost certainly mark the beginning of a major new round of gambling expansion in Connecticut, from casinos to other forms of legalized gambling. I'd like to end by giving you just a brief look at what's waiting in the wings. If either of these bills pass, no matter what area of the state you happen to live in, chances are some of these new forms are going to arrive here on your doorstep. Here are some of those things that are happening. Video slots are spreading beyond casinos into local neighborhoods in more and more casino states. There are now some 12,000 video slot machines at so-called lottery delicatessens in Oregon. In other words, spread by the lottery. This, incidentally, has been a big issue for Senator Hwang, the role of the lottery in spreading casino gambling and legalized gambling across the country. 12,000 of these video slot machines at lottery delis, just part of the neighborhood now in Oregon. And 24,000 video slots. Incidentally, video slots are enhanced slot machines with enhanced video, increasingly using games that teenagers and young people particularly love on the screen. In any event, so we got 12,000 video slot machines in Oregon. We got 24,000 now video slots at bars, restaurants, truck stops, fraternal clubs, commercial gaming cafes with really cutesy names like Pennies and Joyce's and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You get the idea. Come on in and play. As long as they have a vending machine and offer beer, they can have 5 slot machines. And these are being turned in, more and more of these premises by retailers in order to bring in more money are bringing in the slot machines. The first 2 flower shops in the Chicago area have now even introduced slot machines. Flower shops. Key Pennsylvania legislators have now proposed opening 20 local slots parlors across Pennsylvania to be owned by the state's 10 current casinos. There is a massive effort underway to expand sports betting in the United States, including on daily fantasy sports. You watch pro football, you watch pro baseball, increasingly, what do you see? Come on in, bet, make a bet. Create your team, make a bet. You can do it not only now for the entire season, but you can do it every single day with a new outcome every day. And thanks to a 2011 U.S. Justice Department ruling, New Jersey, Delaware, and Nevada have legalized in-state online betting for their casinos. And a number of other states are considering it. Bill was just introduced in the Massachusetts legislature. Addiction experts are particularly concerned about this, a whole new area, because online gambling obviously available 24 hours a day. You can bet and place as many as 100 bets online in the course of 60 seconds. And of course, it's particularly attractive to younger people who look toward instant gratification. Every time you bet, you know if you won immediately. So in ending, let me ask kind of a rhetorical question. Is there any realistic possibility of stopping this relentless spread of government-promoted and government-sponsored gambling? Any chance of blocking its expansion into literally every nook and cranny of our society? The answer, fortunately, is yes, but only if enough people are willing to take the time to help educate the public on this issue and urge their legislators to oppose it. And fortunately, that is beginning to happen in Connecticut with the formation of a remarkable, broad-based group called the Coalition Against Casino Expansion in Connecticut. It now consists of 14 groups: the Connecticut Conference of the United Church of Christ, the Episcopal Church of Connecticut, the Connecticut League of Women Voters, I'm so pleased to say, the Connecticut Catholic Conference, including all of the Catholic bishops in Connecticut, the Family Institute of Connecticut, the New England Synod of the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, the Connecticut Association of Human Services, the Council of Churches of Greater Bridgeport, Advocacy Unlimited, the Farmington Valley American Muslim Center and Bridgeport Islamic Community Center, the New England Conference of the United Methodist Church, and the American Baptist Churches of Connecticut. In addition, thanks in no small measure to your former First Selectman, to Woody, the Western Connecticut Council of Governments, which includes 15 Fairfield County towns, including, of course, Weston, has taken a strong stand against gambling expansion in Connecticut. If you care about this issue, there are two important steps you can take. First, write, call, or email your legislators this coming week or the week after. But as soon as you think about it, as soon as you can, urging them to oppose any bill that would expand casino gambling in Connecticut. And second, consider making a small donation to the coalition, which you are now a part of. The address for the coalition's website, which includes contact information for legislators, is available on a piece of paper you can take with you on a table at the back of the room. And I hope you'll all consider doing that. Thank you very much. And I would be pleased, along with Tony, to answer any of your questions.
I'm gonna pop up and address some of the other issues. It's always hard to follow Bob, and thank you, Congressman Steele, and thank you for your incredible advocacy on this issue and the education of our greater community on this issue. But I also want to take a moment to thank you for your public service as our congressman in the 2nd District. Bob has taught me so much about this issue, but what I have learned from talking to advocates and coalitions and following this issue for the last 4 years, it seems like forever, is this is such a critical dialogue in our community. And it is not getting the fair share of the opportunity to be discussed. So I want to first thank Bob. I want to thank the town of Weston for hosting this. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for your leadership on this issue, but on so many other issues as well. You know, one of the reasons we're pushing to explore this issue of gambling and casino expansion is the fact that the 800-pound gorilla in this state is a crushing budget crisis. And we are in a state of desperately looking for revenue and for how we can help create jobs and build our businesses and our economy. And that is part of the discussion where the casinos have merit. They are raising the fact that we need additional revenue to help our crisis, to care for the critical services, that building a new casino could create jobs and build the economy. But that's only part of the story. And I think that is really why Bob has kind of traveled all through the region in bringing out, as Paul Harvey would say, the other part of the story, the rest of the stories, he would say. Gambling has a unique history in our state. Over 25 years ago, we reached an agreement in which the federally recognized tribes, with a compact with the state of Connecticut, has reached an agreement where we allowed gambling on tribal land in exchange for 25% of slot machine revenue. And it has been a relationship where the state of Connecticut has benefited. But also we need to understand it has morphed into something far more than just a convenient tax relationship. It has morphed into a permanent impact on our society in which gambling is part and parcel, an essential part of our fabric of Connecticut. But it has its misgivings, in my opinion. You know, it's a lure to talk about gambling to solve all the problems. Do we remember the fact that I still listen and talk to people when they talk about how the lottery was going to be strictly focused on providing educational funding? I still hear that to this day. I could tell you, lottery goes to everything else with very little going to education. It's a lure. It's in some cases, my opinion again, a path that we have to consider very, very carefully. We talk about casinos as a sure bet when you hear it, right? In radios, in TVs, in social media. All you see about casinos and gambling is the excitement, the allure, the fun. For anyone that's gone into those parlors, for anybody who's walked through those halls of slots and gambling, it is anything but that. You have people that are most vulnerable, most at risk, being lured in by the next win. And I think that's the part that doesn't get said. That's the part that doesn't get addressed when we're talking about this issue. You know, as a legislator, we have an important responsibility. The laws and the actions that we enact has to have consequences and impact. And I look to precedents. And all I need to do is look one state down south and look at the state of New Jersey. The state of New Jersey is the poster child for Northeast gambling. Atlantic City was it. The lure of 20 plus years ago that Atlantic City, the shining gem, would solve all the problems in the budget, would solve all the solutions to our jobs and our economy. Well, you know what? Up in Hartford, nobody likes to talk about Atlantic City right now because it is a city in bankruptcy. It is a city that is fraught with tragedies and devastation. It is fraught with white elephant buildings that are mirages of money and lure of fun. To the point that New Jersey just last year had a statewide referendum to say no more gambling of any form. It was a statewide referendum. And the people of New Jersey voted 4-1 to support that ban. Now, like I said earlier, casino gambling has a unique relationship in our state. It is an undeniable impact in critical services and revenue to our state. But I also believe if you looked at the facts behind the glitz, you are looking at a saturated, declining market. Where 25 years ago, we were the only game in town. But now virtually everywhere you go, there is slots. Everywhere you see gambling. And the only way we can expand that business model is to increase more addicted gamblers. Those things don't get said. Think about this. For any of you who's played Candy Crush, all right, and maybe I'm older, I think of Pac-Man. And you think of a generation that's growing up that's accustomed to interactivity on their computer and on their phones. Can you imagine if we went online gambling and put a dollar denomination? Think of all of that. Candy Crush. Can you imagine if they put a penny segment for everything you do? Or Angry Birds. We don't think in that context, do we? But I can tell you the industry does. One of the most phenomenal things that shocked me and scared me was in my research and exploration, Silicon Valley. They're losing some of their best and most talented game makers to casinos, to the gambling industry. Walk down the slots and look at the games that are being promoted. Their TV shows, their movies, their game shows, their pop culture. There's a cultural identification and make you feel connected to something that is visceral and connectedness. It's subtle. You have some of the most brilliant mind psychologies playing into the ploy of gambling. You know, and in some cases when we talk about gambling, most people would say, look, I place a bet, I buy a lottery ticket, I even bet on the Super Bowl. I'm not going to get addicted. What's with a little bit of fun? But that's the problem. You know, Congressman Steele talked about the ledger official. I've heard so many testimonies from priests and pastors who have counseled and supported broken lives. In fact, we have a pastor who resides in East Windsor where they're contemplating putting a casino. She herself, upstanding citizen, you hear her present and you hear her speak and you're inspired. And she talked about a story of someone's lives altered, lies to their families, crimes perpetrated to feed a habit. And then she ends the story by saying, that's me. A pastor of upstanding integrity and character. She was lured by addiction. I had an individual who comes up and said, I started my addiction by winning in my church bingo. And here's the most interesting, insidious part of this. When you come up and testify in Hartford, when there is a long wait, you actually pick a number as part of a lottery. It's a democratic process, right? That same individual said, I could never pull a number. Because in fighting her addiction, if she ever pulled the number 1, she's a winner. She's back to the slots. Addiction is real. But we don't hear about that. We don't hear about that at all. All we hear about jobs, tax revenue, and what's a little more fun, right? So I think we need to fully understand the fact that as we talked about the coalition, and I want to thank the League for the leadership on this issue, but there's so many other. Look, when do we get all 5 Catholic bishops to agree on anything? They have. We have the United Churches. We have the Islamic Council. We have the Greater Bridgeport Council of Churches. We have the Family Institute, which is a extremely conservative family value. And they're lined up with very, very liberal context. There is no political lines in this. But guess what? Have any of you heard about the coalition? They represent such a significant part of our community. But guess what? I coined the phrase, we are in a David versus Goliath battle. I, as a legislator up in Hartford, advocating against the expansion of casinos, I feel like such a lonely lamb ready to be led to bad news. But here's the reality. We have lobbyists for the casinos. We have lawyers. We have publicists. We have wine and dine relationships that pervade. There are hundreds of thousands of dollars being spent. You can't go onto your social media feed without MGM or Foxwoods or Mohegan Sun popping up saying, casino expansion, it's good for Connecticut. It's good for jobs. The problem is the coalition that represents the people that are most at risk, that are most vulnerable, that are just struggling to provide support and counsel. They're just not getting heard. They're just not getting heard. And I just had a discussion where I share with Bob, my frustration is, I just talked to a couple of good colleagues that represent communities in this area. And I listened to the individual give a presentation about this debate. And I listened for a good 10 minutes. And all I heard was, it's a revenue issue. It's a job issue. It's an equal protection issue, whether we should allow tribal casino gambling out of tribal land. Those are all legitimate concerns. But after 10, 15 minutes of listening to the individual explain, I might have lost my cool a little bit when I said, have you talked about the societal impact of gambling addiction? Have you talked about the fact that gambling addiction is the single highest cause of suicides in our society? Have you heard it? No, it's a well-kept secret. Have you heard that the breakup of families and structure and contributions into our greater business and economy as a result of addiction to gambling? No, you don't. Those are dialogues that we need to have when we make that comparison. Would you believe that the state of Connecticut has not done a comprehensive societal cost of gambling addiction in over 10 years? So it's something that gets slipped under the cover. It gets swept away because all we're going to talk about is how do we fix our crisis and budget. We're going to get $200 million to fix our budget. We're going to create jobs. Wait a second. You're taking money from the most vulnerable. You're creating addiction in which social services and critical government expenses go to support. You're breaking down the very fabric of a productive, contributing society. We're not having that conversation. And here's what's happening in the legislative process. We passed 2 bills, as Congressman Steele said, out of the committee. Right now, it's sitting, literally sitting, in our House and Senate. And the Speaker of the House just said earlier this week, you know, we need jobs, we need money, and I think we're going to put one of the casinos bills into the budget. This is how it's done. It doesn't have a direct vote. So when you write your legislature, you say, I'm going to fight against Bill 7319. Well, you know what? 7319 may not exist. It's going to get inserted as a provision allowing the consideration of expansion of gambling in section 92 of a 600-page document. And the legislators are going to vote yes or no, unless they fight to say, we don't want it in the state, period. Now, people are going to say, why should you care about this? Why are we having this in Weston? Why are we having this in Fairfield? Well, it's because we're worried about it coming to Bridgeport, right? But I would encourage all of us to frame the argument that there should be no expansion of gambling anywhere. And I think that is the context and the dialogue we need to have. It's not just not in Bridgeport. It has to be a dialogue of saying, what are the costs? What are the trade-offs? And let's have that conversation. Let's talk about, are we as a state government, as legislative leaders, in a position to empower and enable legislation that says we're in the business of gambling. You know, what's fascinating is we talk about that money revenue. An interesting part, I'm a big supporter of arts and culture in our communities. That budget's always under constant threat. Here's the deal. This was a study done 3 years ago, and there's a new one coming up from the Arts Council of Fairfield County. The arts and culture industry adds over $600 million to our local economy by the peripheral businesses and visits and appeal of arts and culture and celebrating it. Why aren't we talking about that? Why are we not advocating for new technology and industry such as biotechnology, such as ecotourism as a factor of generating revenue and creating a much more vibrant, engaged, and growth-oriented industry. Why are we falling prey to the same old lure of where gambling rests its success on? Easy money. One time, you're gonna win big. We've almost accepted it into our vernacular. You can't win if you don't play. We've now accepted lottery as part of our fabric and culture. That's gambling. That's gambling. We've now accepted Keno that goes into our family restaurants where families go to have a meal and mom and dad pulls out a slot sheet and says to Joe and Jill, why don't you fill this out? Watch the bouncing ball. Interactive is going to lure people in. But let us remember it can happen to anyone. Remember that individual who started her addiction because of bingo. The idea that somebody could be a winner. So I implore you to begin this dialogue, to get to your legislators, to explain to them that we can manage our budget. We can create revenue by other means without creating an environment that wreaks havoc, that creates addiction, that breaks up the very fabric of thriftiness, diligence, and the success of working hard to earn every penny and not be lured by the fact I could put $1 and win $1 million. God bless the person who does that. But have we heard the story of the hundreds of thousands that didn't? That's what we need to discuss. And that is what is so important for us to discuss gambling expansion. Don't begin by saying gambling's bad. Let's address the consequences and have that dialogue based upon reason and cost and benefit analysis rather than not in my backyard. I think when you do that, it's a much more powerful debate. It's a much more effective debate. So I want to thank the League for doing this. And we're going to take some questions on this. And it's always great to hear Bob. Bob, you have taught me more about this issue than I'm sure you've even forgotten. So, and in fact, I understand Bob and I are working on an op-ed that will create a access point for social media output to let people know that they can have a voice in this matter and that it doesn't get slipped under the cover of night into a budget and then we have to deal with it. So.
Has the coalition done radio spots? Or spots on Connecticut Mirror or other? I don't know what the opportunity.
It would be great if we got more money, right? We would love to. And I think we are at a critical point right now in the next 5 weeks as we engage in the budget process for people to be heard. It's fascinating. The speaker also said that in Bridgeport, the legislators are pushing and want to have a casino there. And they're going to give every due consideration to it. But you know what's funny? Talk to the Greater Bridgeport Council, to the Catholics, to the United Congregation Church, and to the Islamic councils. None of them want it. So who are we listening to? Here's the other fascinating part. The Quinnipiac University did a poll about 1.5 years ago and asked, how did people in this state feel about gambling expansion outside tribal land? Over 70% of the Connecticut residents, similar to New Jersey in fact, said no more expansion outside of tribal land. They respect the unique relationship we have, as I said earlier. But it's over 70%. Boy, has anybody heard that? But to answer your question, yes, we're going to try to raise money, but let's go back to it. It is, and it feels like it for me, a David versus Goliath. And I feel like I'm David with very few stones to throw. Well, let us hope, let us hope. So I'll come back into the table, we'll take more questions from everyone, and address your questions if you could to each of the respective people.
May I just ask everybody to have a round of applause for our two speakers today? I would like to include in a round of applause our videography team, Mr. and Mrs. Wurtenberg, who are here today. I'd like to say that the videotape will be viewable on the Town of Weston's website. Just Google Town of Weston, Connecticut, and also there will be a link on that website to the League of Women Voters of Weston. So you will be able to access the video that way. I'd also like to give a little bit of information on how you can contact, and this information is here. Mr. Steele has brought it for us. The coalition, it's called the Coalition Against Casino Expansion in Connecticut, and it's got a good, memorable website address. It's nomorecasinosInCT.org. No more casinos in CT.org.
We had great momentum where there were a lot of hands, so hold on, remember your questions, but please, we'd love to get your thoughts and feedback.
So, yes, now.
It's the beard had me.
The beard happens. Well, first of all, I had no idea you were old enough to know who Paul Harvey was.
The rest of the story, love it.
Secondly, I want to compliment Mr. Steele for the work in that vineyard at a time, knowing what the impact of gambling is from the earliest days in Connecticut. And third, I want to say that I'm totally on board with this effort, and lots of thoughts about it. But let me go back to the elephant or the Goliath or whatever it is in the room, which is that in a way it's dishonest. It's dishonest for the people who pay higher taxes to allow their tax burden to be shoved down to people who are not as fortunate. Which leads me to this question, which is that the $200 million, why not offset that with taxes? Why not stand up with your other half and say, you know, that $200 billion, we could raise more legitimately, and therefore we don't have to expand again. Well, second, sorry. And second, I do not know, I would suspect the answer is no, but I don't know whether the state of Connecticut, the legislature, is willing to spend more money to help people with these gambling addictions and other problems related to gambling.
I can answer both questions. I think the first question is, it's the bane of our existence right now in the General Assembly to address this crushing debt burden that we have and the shortfall in regards to taxable revenue. It seems remarkable that it was only 25 plus years ago when the state of Connecticut instituted the income tax, and that would have been the solution to it all. But what we have seen is an erosion of doing the things that we needed to do. And you need to understand, we are exploring this and facing this burden after two of the highest record tax increases in the history of our great state. Saying that, it may not be a taxing issue. It may be a spending discipline issue. When you think of the revenues that we have, and you look at the potential inefficiencies and the lack of action by our government, not just this administration, but the past 20, 30 years in pension, as well as in benefits. Here's what's remarkable. We've not voted on a labor contract in over 20 years. We have not complied with a spending cap mandate because the legislator never voted on it. So my aspect to this, we are exploring all forms of how we can provide critical governmental services, but we have not made the decision to streamline and change how government functions and how we address, in my opinion, the inefficiencies. The fact that when I can explore that each department head of the various departments within our agencies, and there are hundreds of them, have their own IT structure, and that I can't send an email with greater than 10 megs of volume, it is a deficiency. And the fact that we have a DMV that treats its consumers as though they are a problem, it is an inefficiency in our government. So yes, I will explore and respectfully look at all revenue sources, but one of the things we have to do, which we've not done in making the hard decisions, is have we made the decisions necessary to change our government to reflect the valuation of every tax dollar we have? And if we've done that, everything else is on the table. But I'm sharing with you, we are on the heel of 2 record tax increases, and we have driven people out of our state. And if you increase taxes, it is only going to exacerbate because we've not solved the core problems. So that's my opinion. The second point in regards to money and allocations for expansion. I, along with Bob's encouraging,
Social services, I asked.
social services, counseling, here's the thing. The main problem gambling awareness and advocacy agency draws nearly 80% of their funding from the casinos. What's remarkable, Bob and I have gone to many hearings where the agency comes up and they have been yeoman's worker, but their first disclaimer is, we're not here to condemn or condone gambling. We're here to handle addiction. Well, I'm here to address the issue that I don't want expansion of gambling in our communities. And the fact is, we have to have a state to do a annual societal cost to really fully understand measurements and data points of where the problems are needed. To not have done one in over 10 plus years is absolutely an injustice. And the fact that we will continue to want to expand at such fast-paced speed without such a study is a disservice to representation of our people. So we do need to support our agencies, but then I know where the pivot is. If you want to increase money for social services, but you're not willing to tax, you're contradictory. My answer is, if you looked at the line items as I have on 10-point single sheet numbers, there are so much that we generate in taxing the people of our state, and there's so much inefficiency. If you take a look at benefits, and I could spend all day on the fact that we have a pension contribution from our state employees in which employees pay less than 2% into their pension plans. And the fact that we have a healthcare plan that has $350 as a deductible. And if you sign up for a wellness program, it's $0. And that we have a $15 copay where we can go anywhere in this country for care. And that our prescription brand name drug copays are $15. And if you have a ongoing diabetes, it's $0. Where is the parity between individuals that are in the private sector, that are the taxpayer, to say, increase your efficiencies, bring more parity? So my point is this: if we do that, and we still don't have enough revenue to care for the critical services that are necessary, I'm open for conversation. But we've not gone there, and we need to. Bob,
I'd like to just address the issue of the value of the casino money coming into the state. This year, the casinos will provide about $267 billion to the state. that's down to $430 million. It just collapsed. And it's going to continue to collapse no matter what happens, whether we build these casinos or don't build these casinos. Because Massachusetts is in the process of building 3 casinos. New York has already approved constitutionally building additional casinos in New York. There is no way. This is an industry that is kind of starting to collapse on itself because of the competition. But the big point I'd like to make is that when people talk about the $267 million coming into the state, they only talk about what is coming in. They don't talk about the cost of that. And as I mentioned in my talk, the best estimates are that the long-term costs, social costs and economic costs, are 3 times greater than that $267 million. So just if we didn't even have it, we'd actually be making more money. So it isn't even so much as that we need to replace this money as it is we don't need to create more problems, which are just going to compound the problems that we already have. Secondly, Tony's point about the gambling rehabilitation efforts we have in this state. Yes, we do have some. The Connecticut Council on Problem Gambling, as Tony said, however, gets most of its money from where? The casinos. The casinos. So when they speak, they are handcuffed. Their salaries are being paid by the casinos. The people we have set up to take care of our gambling problems are paid by the casinos. I mean, it's almost Orwellian, the situation we've created for ourselves here. Furthermore, the efforts that the casinos make are almost worthless to keep problem gamblers out. There was a big expose on that in the Boston Globe just about 3 or 4 months ago when they talked about, they interviewed several people, including people who had self-excluded themselves from casinos but had no problem walking into casinos and gambling because the casinos didn't take this seriously. What the casinos do take seriously, however, is this. If you self-exclude yourself because you say, look, I have a gambling addiction, in a moment of lucidity, I'm going to sign this paper that says, keep me out of the casino. Nonetheless, I go into the casino, you don't keep me out of the casino, and I gamble. And if I win, and I go to the window to be paid off, they say, oh, you're excluded. You can't win anything here. However, if you have lost, they keep going. This whole thing is stacked in so many ways, it just makes your heads. Sorry. I'm sure.
I have a couple of things to say. One, you're on Facebook right now, both of you.
Oh, great.
And the headline is the costs outweigh the gains, okay?
That's
So
right.
thanks for doing this, guys. It's really good. Bob and I go way back in my days at AP when he was running for governor, and we've had fun talking about
1732, right?
And I read the book, The Curse, and I endorse it to everyone here. You gotta read it. It's an exciting novel, and sorry to say that it's based on true facts, but it's a really riveting story. So
And today, I want to say all the proceeds are going to the coalition.
that's right. So that's terrific. Now, my question is this: you gotta help me out here in Fairfield County because we have so many financial wizards around here who play the stock market. Help me with that argument. That's gambling too, especially day trading. Help me with that argument. What do we say to that? Why is the stock market different from gambling?
Well, I'll try to. There's no question people have lost a lot of money on the stock market, some people. But the only answer I can give to that is that if you have invested rather than speculated over the years by buying, for example, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, companies, you've made a lot of money. Anybody who has consistently gambled, in 99% of the cases, has lost a lot of money. The fact of the matter is, when you gamble at a casino, the house takes approximately 9 to 10% of everything you gamble.
Bless you.
On certain games, it's more. On roulette, they get about 15%. On blackjack, if you're a good blackjack player, the odds are much closer to even. But the fact of the matter is, about 9 to 10% of everything you bet. So it is automatic. Statistically, it is impossible to win if you gamble over time. Sure, you can win a jackpot, you can win a hand, you can win this, you can win that. But if you keep going, and keep going, and keep going, you are going to lose. That's the best answer I can give you. One other thing that comes to mind that I'd like to mention is these new kinds of casinos. For example, the one they want to put in Windsor Locks, or the one they would put in Bridgeport. The one in Bridgeport presumably would be twice as big or 3 times as big. I don't know. They haven't said it. But these casinos are loaded with machine gambling. 80% of their profits come from machine gambling. And the people who are attracted are people within an hour's drive, and especially local people. You've got, what, 130,000 people in Bridgeport. Imagine the social impact of putting in a casino with thousands of slot machines in Bridgeport. Who is going to come first? People who live nearby. It will be an economic disaster for Bridgeport over a period of years, just as it's been, as Tony said, in Atlantic City or anywhere. So these new casinos, not even what we're not talking about Las Vegas resort casinos. We're talking about casinos that use the most sophisticated kind of marketing to attract local people to make numerous repeat visits, in some cases 2 or 3 times a week. And that becomes their pastime. And that's why it hurts other businesses. That's why it hurts the whole fabric of society. That's the best answer I can give.
Thank you.
Why would investors be interested in opening new and more casinos when the income from the existing ones is declining?
This kind of goes to the question, the earlier question. Investors are an odd lot. They all think they know. I know better than you do. You know better than she does about what is going to make money and what doesn't make money. Everybody has different ideas. Now, the casino companies have become extremely proficient at basically getting a payback on their investment within 3 years. So they're not really worried about what happens 10 years from now or 15 years from now or whatever it may be. These are money-making machines in the early years. And they figure they can get their money back, they can make a profit, and what happens in the future, whether it be to the community or individual players or whoever it may be, happens. It's really not going to be their problem.
And MGM, I will follow up with Bob. MGM, who is exploring the constitutional clause of opening up the bidding process, was quite clear in saying that their interest lies in opening up a casino in southwestern Connecticut. And the rationale is there is affluence, the proximity to New York. You know, I think there may be people in the audience that remember it was 20 plus years ago, Joe Ganim and Donald Trump with the idea of casino expansion in Bridgeport. I can share with you that MGM, Steve Wynn, and all the various other factors would very much like to come into Fairfield County. It is no longer a if, it is a when, if this bill ever gets implemented on a competitive bidding process. And the lure is ultimately, these are not haphazard decisions. It is an incredibly sophisticated, thought out business model of saying, where's the money? Where's the density? And that is the perilous and the slippery slope that we're contemplating right now, the short-term solution. It really is something that is alarming, and we should sound the alarm. Yes, ma'am.
Tony, do you have a bipartisan coalition of legislators with you?
We do, but the challenge is if they don't hear from the community. Look, as I shared with you, the dialogue that I had and my frustration with my fellow legislators, they get caught up with one-sided viewpoints because that's what we do in the silos of the legislative body. We're trying to fix solutions. We're trying to find money. And boy, the casinos are virtually guaranteeing you $200,000 guarantee for the sites and creating jobs, quote unquote, for Bridgeport. It's all very alluring, but we're not looking at the societal cost. So that was my frustration. So yes, there are people, but there has to be an overwhelming awareness that no expansion should occur.
And what committee is the bill in now?
Well, right now, it's in the House and the Senate.
Oh, so it's not in.
So it's out. It's out. And the fact is, as the speaker has given some foreshadowing, is it could be inserted into a budget. As I said, a 600-page budget, and it's one section, and it's a yes or no vote. So you're going to vote on education, infrastructure, social services, and there's this one provision that says, and we shall allow competitive bidding process of gambling in the state of Connecticut. Guess what? Are you gonna vote down the budget, or are you gonna vote yes or no? That's the complexity, right? So the fact, as I said to Bob, even I shared with Bob earlier, the fact would be your advocacy, your awareness to say, look, we can explore different things on revenue. Casino and gambling expansion should not be one. And so as a result, the key is to not have it included in any budget discussion. But because once it's in there, it's a yes or no vote.
How do you stop it?
Yeah.
The people have a voice.
No, but to get in the budget.
Well, you need to write your legislators. Here's the funny exercise. The beauty with the town of Weston is you actually know who your state senators and your state representatives are. I will share with you this weekend, when you're in church, when you're in a social setting, and you are a friend of 5 people, just as a kind of a causal query, say to them, by the way, do you know who your state rep is? By the way, do you know who your state senator is? And do you know, because they'll all know who their first select person is, but what we do in Hartford, we're kind of isolated unless you're made aware. So you ask them, well, then you know what? You should call your state rep. You should write your state senators, find out who they are, and tell them that you don't want them. It matters.
Are they with you in this position, or are they not? We don't have a large group we're talking about.
Well, the thing is, unless they know that you care, they'll go along. Because guess what? It is a lot easier solution right now to not make hard decisions about governmental structure than for us to say, geez, I'm not going to sneeze at 200 million that I could solve developmental services, critical services, right? But we can make these decisions. So there are different ways to look about it.
But it's so few people that are involved.
Oh, no, there are a lot of people. There are a lot of people. That's why they're trying to do it.
Represent Weston.
Well, this is a statewide coalition. This is a statewide coalition.
But the question is, are people representing Weston in the state legislature and in the state senate, are they with you or not with you?
I can't speak for Senator Boucher, but I think she is very sympathetic and understands the societal cost in regards to Representative Dunsby. Representative Dunsby was actually given that speech by a fellow legislator in which I was keenly interested in and spoke vocally about. So he's got that societal cost factor. He was getting instruction, and look, he did his due diligence. So he got my presentation unexpectedly.
So we need to write them.
Yeah.
That was my question.
Oh, okay, so yes, thank you.
There.
Yes, I think the delegation is fully aware of the issue, but they've heard from me. I can tell you that. They need to hear from you.
What is the date of the vote? The potential
There is no date.
But when might it be? What's the earliest?
It,
June
it,
8th?
it could be Tuesday.
It could be that soon.
Yeah. Because it's already been out of the committee. Yes, ma'am.
Two things. One, on the stock market versus gambling. My husband's in finance. He does not do day trading, but he does do longer term investments. And I can guarantee you, this is not based on chance. The stock market, when they're working in the stock market, it is long, thoughtful analysis, intellectual rigor involved at all levels. We're not talking slot machines. We're not talking the lure to drag you into day trading, and then you get there and you press the spin. This, no. Stock market is a totally different kettle of fish. My other question is I hear you on the harms. I'm with you. You've got me on that. So on the flip side, I'm going to do my part. I will reach out to those I know and start spreading the word. On the flip side, what other ideas are there? Other ideas that are being floated around? Are there any other businesses that we're trying to encourage to come into the state? I'm thinking, what would appeal to my family? I've got 4 kids, a husband, all young. We're going up into the teen years. Honestly, the first thing that came to my mind was like, okay, massive, awesome amusement park. But there are so many things that can be used to build on Connecticut's strengths. We have the shoreline. We have our proximity to New York and Boston. We have our history. We're technically the gateway to New England.
Yes.
So what can we do to build on all of that in addition to the biotech?
I shared in my speech in regards to arts and culture.
Yes.
It is a tremendous economic driver, and the contributions and the peripheral of building up STEAM, science, technology, arts, engineering, and math. I think when we talked about ecotourism, the fact that we have some of the most incredible parks that from Sherwood Island all the way up to Huntington Park, all the way up through the various areas. It is a huge eco-economic gateway to attracting people. But I think the other part is, you're right. We have a fantastic quality of life in our community in which people are engaged in their community. Look, you look out today. I mean, I think Paula was saying, just take a moment when you leave this building and just really admire the dogwoods blooming. And really remember, we don't need amusement parks and artificial, but we can just simply walk and enjoy what nature has to offer. Those are things that we talk about. But you know what? You're gonna counter with technology. You're gonna counter with what the next sizzle is, when the reality, for me, and the way I approach it is, we live in one of the most beautiful, one of the most incredible states in this country. Let's build upon it, and let's build on the people that we have.
I'd like to give you one note of encouragement also. The problem we're facing here with this current legislation is, as Tony has said, if it's made a part of the budget, legislators might have all kinds of excuses as to why they voted for the budget, and they couldn't help that this was part of the budget, and Connecticut had to have a budget. But as Tony has pointed out, there will be a great deal of discussion as to what goes in the budget in the various Democratic and Republican caucuses. And the legislators at that time are going to be strongly influenced by what they recently heard from their constituents. I want to give you one example. In 2015, there was actually a vote in both the House and the Senate on gambling expansion. And the Senate vote approved the bill that was being considered at the point, which then really failed, but nonetheless approved it 20-16. It was that close. Out of 36 senators, it was 20-16. One of the senators, the senator from Northern Connecticut, told me, this was an actual conversation, he said, I could not vote for that bill. I voted against it because my mail was overwhelmingly against the casino. I said, really? I said, you got a lot of mail? He said, yeah. He said, I must have done 5 or 6 letters. So your letter and your voice really consequence.
Woody, then Margaret?
Yeah, I have two different comments, okay? One is, I would like to echo Tom's comment about the book. I heard about it, I don't know, a while ago, and the book intrigued me, and I bought one, and I read it, and it's amazing. And it gives you a better sense, I think, of what we're up against here, and the addictive nature of gambling, and how people can get compromised. And it's fiction, but you think it's real, because it's got so many facts in it. So I hope you don't mind an unpaid commercial.
I don't think he does.
Yeah, I think the book is great. But the other thing comment I want to make is I worked in the private sector in finance for over 30 years. And the thing that gets me is that nobody in Hartford seems to understand we have a spending problem. I was pleased to hear you say that. But we don't have a revenue problem, we've got a spending problem. And until you get after the spending problem, nothing's gonna happen. You know, I mean, you can add taxes all you want.
We can't look for easy, quick fixes, and that's what it does. We borrow, and we look at easy solutions. And I go back, I mean, you still talk to people to this day, well, a lot of these go into education. That's what it does, right? Not.
Well, I would challenge that comment, Tony. I mean, I think there are things that you can look for, and I think that, just as Bob has said, when the people rise up and say, you know,
Right.
we don't want casinos, if people rise up and say, fix the goddamn spending problem.
Look, 5 or 6 letters had a sway. I mean, look. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that this is coming all around. It started here, the league's involvement started right here with your wife, Tom, who suggested that at a program planning meeting, talk about things that are from the past. Program planning meeting said, why don't we do something? And we did. And I think, so maybe if the whole argument in the legislature is about at the bottom right now, maybe the only place we've got to go now is up, and let's build on your.
Well, I would extend what I said earlier. When in your social settings, address the issue. Have the dialogue. And I said, I'm not condemning our unique relationship we have with our tribes. Look, they have contributed to our economy. But the fact is, we're looking at expansion outside of tribal land. And that's a totally different dynamic. And I think I offer that the dialogue is necessary, the conversation, and the societal cost needs to be addressed.
I just want to mention that the League of Women Voters Know Your Town directory is available at the back, and it's also available online at the town's website, and it does list state national representatives and contact for them. That's available too.
I want to say that we're coming to the closing now, where we've been here since 10:30. It's now about 12. I am so pleased that the League of Women Voters of Weston has presented this forum. I think a lot of interesting issues were raised. I'd like Mr. Senator Hwang to provide his email address as well.
Sure, you can go to the website, www.senatorhwang.com, and spell Hwang. Send your letters to me and I will make sure that gets forwarded. But Congressman Steele and I are working on an op-ed that will give direct social media contact. And you know, I liked his story when 5 or 6 made an impact. And I think my encouragement is to have that dialogue outside of the broader community, but not from the context of not in my neighborhood, but rather a real open and constructive cost-benefit analysis of what this expansion's impact is. And are we, as a state of Connecticut, enabling and empowering further expansion of gambling? That's what it comes to. And for me, it's a very strong no.
Thank you. The other thing I'd like to mention, just real quickly, is the book that Mr. Steele authored is available, and he is there able to autograph it for you. And the last thing I want to mention is thank you for talking about New Jersey. I lived in New Jersey for a while before coming back to Connecticut. At the time that there was a referendum on the ballot to authorize and make legal casino gambling in New Jersey. And I remember vividly saying no, because I didn't believe for 1 minute what they said in the referendum. Do you approve of casino gambling in New Jersey? The funds will be will be dedicated to senior services. So it is a slippery slope, and we've already begun it, and I hope everybody will write to either Tony or to Tony Boucher or to Adam Dunsby. I'm sure that most people are in agreement with what we've heard today. Very, very informative. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie.